So before we get rolling, I just want to share something that happened earlier on. I was talking to my wife. I gave her a call just to say hi and check in on the family back home. And she told me my daughter was a little stressed. She's 11. And I get on the phone with her, and she proceeds to tell me that she's really upset because she has to go and present her paper on the Qin dynasty to 20 people in her class. So I said, I understand, I get it. It's tough. I know what you're feeling. She says, Dad, you don't have any idea. That's what she said. So if you indulge me for 1 second. All right. If I get the people on this side, just come in a bit. All right. Thank you. That aside, if you could flip us. Thank you. So I'm Kevin Ford, and I'm a customer engineer at Google Cloud, specializing in the Apigee API management platform. I'm really happy to have Brian here. He's a customer of ours from Kaiser, and we've been working together for around a year now. And he's here to talk about Kaiser's journey toward an API-first strategy. And take it away.
Perfect. So thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Google, for giving me the platform here to speak about what we've been doing for the past year. So again, my name is Brian Hooper. I'm a senior manager within the CAS organization, and my area of responsibility is the middleware infrastructure. So I have product ownership over API management, MFT, messaging-based technologies such as IB, MQ, and Kafka. So as Kevin mentioned, our relationship with Kaiser Permanente started a little over a year ago, and it was at a time when we were reevaluating our current API strategy and trying to decide if it was the right direction for us to go for the next 5 years. And unfortunately, it kind of uncovered some hard truths on the way we were positioned and if it was going to make sense for us down the year or the next 5 years. So before I kind of go into that journey, I want to just bring up kind of the quick agenda, just to give everybody level set here. So who is Kaiser Permanente? Kaiser Permanente's API strategy, the challenges that we face not only as Kaiser Permanente, but as a healthcare leader, the IT transformation at Kaiser Permanente, the API management, or what we call AMP, and that's really the endeavor that we, Kevin and the rest of the Google team, and I see a lot of my teammates here from Kaiser, that we've been working through for the past year. And then I want to share some of the initial benefits that we're seeing right now. And then finally, Kevin's going to take everything that I said, and he's going to actually show it to you. So no pressure, but he's going to show you how, we're going to show the CI/CD pipeline and how we're doing partner onboarding and those kind of features. So with that said, actually, Kevin, do you want to speak about this real quick?
Yeah, so we'd like to take questions at the end of the session. We have Dory, and if you've been attending sessions, you already know this. So look for the session in the next app. Find the Dory, and please ask questions there. We'll also have a colleague going around with a mic for the room, but it's better in the Dory. Everybody gets to upvote, and it's a better experience. So please try to do that.
Okay. So before we get into the journey, I'd like to talk a little bit about who Kaiser Permanente is. Some of you guys, again, you may not know who we are, depending on where you're located. We are one of the largest integrated healthcare companies in the US. We are both the payer and the provider. We're also not-for-profit. We started off initially with, helping doing healthcare aid for civil engineering projects, and then we publicly opened for enrollment in 1945. So it's a little over 70 years. We have, to date, 12.2 million members across 10 states. And last year, we had 199 mobile visits to our mobile app. So 199 million different visits. The other thing I'd like to just kind of mention before we move on is one of the cool things that I think Kaiser did a few years ago is we actually decided we were going to open up our own School of Medicine. So a few years back, we broke ground in Pasadena. And I'm thrilled to announce that in August 2020, we're going to be opening our doors for our own School of Medicine. And for the classes of 2020 through 2024, we're actually waiving tuition for everybody who enrolls. So pretty thrilled about that. So Kaiser Permanente's API strategy. So let's level set here because there's going to be some folks here who are very much business leaders and some who are technical architects and could say everything backwards and frontwards. So because of that, let's just take 2 minutes, indulge me, a little level set. So API, Application Programming Interface. What is that? So if you're like me and you had to go to Starbucks this morning because you were running behind because you were working on your slide deck to make sure it was perfect, I was hustling to get over here, and I went onto my Starbucks app, and I clicked the app, and instantly it said, here are the locations of the closest Starbucks to you. So I went in, I found the location that was going to be in the walking path to the Palace Theater here, or Palace Hotel. I then went through, and it was an API call. So then I went through and I looked at my history, picked out of the drinks that previous history, API call. Pick the size, pick the temperature, et cetera. At the end of that, I had made a series of API calls. And about 10 minutes later, I was able to just walk up, grab my coffee, and then I could come over here and be ready for this session. So Starbucks is an easy example. Thank you. Why does Kaiser Permanente care? Why should we invest in APIs? What's driving us? So kind of put this slide together to show a little bit of the landscape. And on the left, we have core systems. And with core systems, this has generally been what our business practice has been for years and years and years. It was connecting our members, our providers, our supply chain, and our regulatory. That's no longer the landscape that we really live in. The second space here in devices, this is everything that, and I don't know if he's here or not, but the director of our internal IoT, they're working on some really, really cool and innovative projects. Oh, there he is, he's raising hand. Thank you, Dave. And they're doing things like connected wheelchairs. They're doing, equipment trackers and fridges with sensors. These are all, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what they are working on. But that's what Kaiser's doing. There's a whole broad spectrum of other third-party platforms that we haven't even touched or even talked about. And again, so IoT ecosystem, again, this is the medical devices. This is your Fitbits, your Apples, your Googles, whoever you want to, whoever you work with. Not all of our members are going to necessarily be on the same platform. So, and we want to be able to tailor our care of what they have with, their core system. So if they're using a Fitbit, how do we bring that back to our core systems? Or easy example, I believe we were doing some air quality tests here in San Leandro, and those sensors are all obviously devices in the green column. But what happens if we had folks in that area who had respiratory issues? Maybe we could send notification to those folks. And so tying those devices back into our core systems, you have to do that in a very easy and seamless manner. And so the reason I bring this up is that's what we're doing with the APIs. All of this is going to be connected with APIs. So we have some challenges. And I like to say that we're unique and that we're the only ones that have issues. And, but we are very complex, and obviously because it's healthcare, there's a lot more sensitivity. There's a lot of data breaches that happened a few years back. So member data is, for us, and for like many healthcare companies, is at the utmost regard. We have to be very, very sensitive to how that data is being used and exposed. PHI, PCI, PII, et cetera, all of that data. So with that being said, we try to take a tempered or cautious approach with technologies, because if we miss, there's a very huge negative impact. So we want to deliver these experiences, but we want to make sure that we're putting enough caution into it so that we can deliver those experiences. So speed and scale. We're already talking, about all of these different devices that we have. I had someone over the weekend who's in the audience here. I asked him, I said, do me a favor, tell me how many runtime APIs we have, or web services we have right now to date. And the number was over 1,000 APIs that we have at Kaiser Permanente. And 85 to 90% of those are all internal. That has nothing to do with the devices that were in the last slide or anything in the third party. So we already have 1,000 plus APIs. As we start to venture into that IoT and that ecosystem, that number is going to exponentiate. And we're going to have 2,000, we're going to have hopefully maybe 3,000 APIs with all of these different connections. How are we going to put in place the structure to manage not only the scale at that, but the speed at which all of these new services and new platforms are being delivered? And again, I think one of those big drivers is obviously the proliferation of IoT. You know, there's new platforms that are coming up every day, every month, every week. My new favorite one, I used to be a Fitbit a long, long time ago. I was also on Pandora just 2 years ago, so don't make fun of me for that. But my new tracker is called MyZone. And I use that to, when I'm working out, tracks my caloric, you know, my calories that I've burned. Did I really go as hard as I could? You know, my heart rate, et cetera. All of that data is sitting there on that platform. So the other IoT device that I really, you know, I just read an article about this 2 weeks ago, and I really liked it, and I wanted to bring this to the forefront here, is there's a thing called Night Watch. Is anybody familiar with Night Watch? No? It was built by a Norwegian company, and it's a bracelet that you put on your arm, and it's to help folks who have epilepsy. Unfortunately, folks who have severe epilepsy, they have a very, very high mortality rate, especially when they go to sleep. So they put this bracelet on, and with, you know, the sweat and some of the different activity markers as it's tracking you, it actually, before this band, you had unfortunately a 1 in 5 shot of surviving. So it was just over 20%, and that was pretty saddening, unfortunately. But with this new bracelet, you have a 4 out of 5 chance now to survive. So the reason I bring that up is, again, all of that information is not made by Kaiser. It's not made by the other healthcare companies. We can leverage all of these other development needs that are happening with other companies, and how do we bring that into our own ecosystem? So I can't even count how many companies are probably in the Bay Area right now that are IoT. I'm sure there's probably north of 50. I wouldn't even be shocked if there was over 100 IoT companies here in the Bay Area. And finally, quality of the member experience. I think of this as a challenge, but I also think of this as an opportunity. It's always a challenge to ensure that, you know, the work that we're doing, the better experiences we can provide for them, the better we are going to have to retain their service or their membership. But it's also going to help promote, you know, new growth and new membership. So maybe next year, instead of 12.2 in 10 states, maybe we're 13.2 next year, or maybe we're 13.5. So based on the innovations that folks internally and externally that we're making and investing that time into is going to help hopefully drive our growth in our membership base. So, scroll. So, IT transformation at Kaiser Permanente. I look at this in basically 3 buckets. API-first strategy, a modern API platform, and IoT ecosystem. What do I mean by API-first strategy? To me, this is more culture. This is more process. We have to be willing to change. So, and this needs to be from a strategic level, you know, how we recognize that, you know, the APIs that we're producing, and how is that going to impact Kaiser? One of the other missions that we have within the group is we want to enable citizen development. We want to eliminate the folks from all the lines of business to have to come to one team to do all of their secure proxy development. We want to be able to push that level of control out to the various lines of business. And that will lead to obviously faster, you know, creation and ideation of new projects and new products. and it will hopefully align the providers to start thinking of their services to API products and aligning that to their consumers. But that's going to be a tough line for us to negotiate. And I think one of the things that we've really spent a lot of effort in, and I know there's a lot of folks here from the team that we've really been tackling, is what we call big G versus little g. And what we mean by that is big governance versus little governance. How do we give the lines of business enough control to work with the approved patterns and the approved standards that we've already built within the back-end systems, but yet, while allowing them to ideate at a fast speed? We don't want them, and frankly, our team is too lean to be able to have everybody come into our group for every time. We want them to be able to have these approved standards and practices and move forward with them, knowing that they don't need to go to cabs. I don't know if anybody has cabs. Cabs are very evil at times, and it takes forever to get through. We don't want them to be sitting in a queue in whatever your ServiceNow repository is and wait 2 weeks for the SLA to happen. So really, the API-first strategy it really has to be a culture change, and it has to come from the top. So a modern API platform, pretty easy one for me. This is, with anything, even in life, you have to have the right tools, or tool set. Even if you were to have a set of socket wrenches and you were missing one socket wrench, inevitably your wife's going to want you to go fix something and it's going to need that socket, and you're not going to have it. So with a modern API platform, it's just not a gateway. There's more to it than the gateway. You have consumer onboarding. How do I register? How do I get my credentials? Provider onboarding. How do I create the secure proxy? Am I following the standards that have been, put in place? Another area that I think kind of gets missed is really the DevOps and ensuring that, what the providers are producing is promoting and getting tested in the correct environments, either internally to your internal gateways or externally to, GCP or Azure or IBM or whoever or AWS. So.
Or GCP.
Or GCP. We'll go with GCP. GCP, guys.
It's a good option.
Yeah. There are no other cloud options. Thank you for that correction. And then obviously the last two are analytics and security. With everything that we do, we need to be able to have that detail to understand, is this service being consumed? How many people are using it? Can I deprecate this service? All of those data points we have to capture, because that is valuable data for not only the operations team, but for the products teams to understand, you can build just to build, but are your services actually being consumed? And then again, security. With everything, you want to make sure that it's secure and that you're securing it in the right spots. And talking about all of that, then, all of this is going to lead us into this IoT and ecosystem, and there's going to be much, much more, and it doesn't have to be just internal. It can be B2B. I know there's a group here within Kaiser that's already working on B2B, B2C, B2G. All of that is going to lend into that partnership of the ecosystem. Okay, so what we've been working on with Apigee is a thing called AMP. It's a TLA within a TLA. It stands for API Management Platform. The reason we called it AMP is we wanted to remove the confines of the software. It should be transparent to the provider and the consumer what they're working on. They want the experience. They want the platform. Probably they don't care who's the underpinnings. So we've called it AMP. There's about 4 main pillars. Create a service, the auto deployment, Apigee as our runtime gateway, and obviously the consumer portal. So kind of going through this, creating a service, we do have another party that represents this. This is what we call our design and governance. It's where our providers can come in, put in all the information about their service, and all their endpoints, et cetera. But it needed to integrate with Apigee, and it needed to integrate with our CI/CD process. We also call this, in our group, we call this the provider portal. There's the development portal, and everybody talks about the development portal, but we wanted to really put a facade in front of the runtime gateway so that the providers could go in, and this is what Kevin will show later on, but go in and be able to choose certain specific patterns based on things that have already been predefined, and it's already exposed, so they know that if they want logging or threat detection or routing, these are already approved patterns, and they can move forward. They don't have to come back to us. Auto deployment, again, CI/CD, I think this, again, as I said earlier, has a little bit, I think this sometimes gets missed out, and I think this is really where the secret sauce is, and this is what's really going to make it for us. But this is, again, taking everything that the providers have done in the portal and be able to push that information to whatever the target, again, whatever the target gateway is, internal or external, or, again, external being only GCP. Okay. So, and I'm going to use a phrase here, and I don't know if it'll resonate or not, but this becomes, the pipeline becomes your developer. And maybe that's a little unorthodox, but what I'm trying to get at with that is, if all of our folks who are building this can build this pipeline, and this is obviously it's high value, and it's repeatable and it's reusable, then we can take these developers who have been working on these things and we can shift them to other high value work. Or, again, there's net new patterns or there's snowflakes or there's anything to that nature. They can work in the outliers, and they don't have to be in the 80% and be with every individual provider working through this. The third pillar is Apigee. Obviously, this is our runtime gateway. We are on-prem, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But we chose an on-prem deployment of the Apigee gateway, and this is where also our consumer portal. Again, most folks, industry calls it a development portal. We've just kind of rebranded it as the consumer portal. And this is where any of the lines of business internally, your supply chain, third party, anybody can use this to get to the services that we expose. Okay, so full disclaimer. We're in a soft launch. We're still vetting some of this out, but I thought this was pretty impactful, so unfortunately for us, securing APIs, it took quite a long time because everything was centered into one team. With this platform, or this AMP platform, we're able to take things that took, I'm going to say weeks, to months, and bring it down to hours. And that's great, and that's a huge, huge first step, but we can always get better. Just with that, it's going to give us a 75% cost savings in just funding idle resources, waiting for things to get built. And we had an 80%, as we did a decomposition and reviewed all of our services, we found that 80% of all of our proxies were standard, and it was repeatable. So with that, it was a huge, huge savings where, again, these are the patterns, and Kevin will talk to it here in a little bit in the demo. And this will address our self-service. We are no longer bound to the back end for any in-flight day-to-day operations. They only need to be a part of the snowflakes or anything net new. So with that, actually, before I move on, I guess I want to leave you with one or two parting thoughts here. Patient outcome goes beyond Kaiser or whoever your healthcare provider is. We need to start bringing down our organizational walls because we are no longer the holder of your health data. It's not only in our records, it's on third-party platforms, it's on devices. We need to bring all of that together to help with our patient care, predictive learning, machine learning to help with precision diagnosis. So if the technology is meaningful for our members, then it needs to be meaningful to us as the healthcare provider. So, and we need to embrace that. but we also need to be ready for the velocity and the speed at which this is going to come to. So at that, I think we're to the demo.
Switch to the demo. Could you switch our screen to the demo, please?
It might be.
There we go. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate some of the things that Brian was talking about and the automated pipeline and both methods of developing API proxies. But first, I want to cover a little bit of terminology. The pointer.
Oh, right there.
Laser?
There is no laser.
No laser. All right, my mouse pointer.
Just on sharps.
So if you look at this, this diagram, we've got clients over here. It could be my watch, phone, web page, et cetera. These are the core systems that Brian was referring to. With an API management platform like Apigee, you have this runtime gateway in the center of it, in between the clients and the backends. And that, I'll be talking about an API proxy. So that is a facade in front of your services, and it allows you to apply a lot of the best practices Brian was saying. There's a lot of cross-cutting concerns you'd otherwise be building out in all of your services. Security, logging, all kinds of things we'll talk about. So proxies are how you expose your services through an API management platform like Apigee. Another thing that I'll be showing you is the developer portal, which is where consumers can come and learn about your APIs, how to use them, see the documentation, register for them, test them out, that kind of thing. And then I'll show you what Brian was referring to as a provider portal. And hopefully we can get all that covered in the time I have. So what I'd like to do is kind of talk with you about, let's get out of here. I want to tell you about two API engineers, two API developers. The first one is on Brian's team. And this particular developer, her responsibility is building out the patterns to be used as a shared service by the lines of business. So that 80% he was talking about, what he means is that of the 1,000 APIs, 800 of them can be run through common reusable sets of policies. So that developer is responsible for building and maintaining all of those shared policies so they don't have to be done individually. I'm going to take you down and show down the path of what it looks like for that developer to come and build some of those functions out in Apigee. There's a ton of features in the platform. I'll be barely scratching the surface. But if I go into my proxies.
Did you pray to the demo gods?
I'm good.
Okay.
We're good. I have faith. So I can add a proxy. I've already got a back-end service that's hosted publicly, and I'm going to get the URL for it here and show you what it looks like. This is not Kaiser data, intentionally not so. It's just a public data set with currency exchange rates. So here it is. That's unprotected, as you can see. I didn't need to provide any credentials or anything. So I'm going to use that as my back-end target and create a proxy, a facade. And I'll call this exchange rates. And I'm going to point to that service that I just showed you. What? Oh. Had an illegal name in there. There we go. The wizard lets me apply some policies. I'm going to make it bare, and I'll take the defaults for the rest, and I'm going to deploy this proxy. So all I've done is created a pass-through proxy to this service I already showed you. And right now, it's uploading it to Apigee Cloud, deploying it to my runtimes, which spans multiple regions across the world, and it's done. So let's go see what that looks like. And again, it's a pass-through, so I'm not doing anything. I'm just taking the traffic. Instead of going directly to that service, I'm hitting Apigee. And this is my new endpoint. And if I open it, once I get the correct path, you'll see it looks exactly the same as the existing service, but the traffic's now going through Apigee. So what's the next step? I might want to secure it. I might want to add some traffic management capabilities. So I can come in here and add what we call policies. We have policies around managing the rate at which traffic flows through the system. We have caching capabilities. Any way you'd want to secure your API, from API key, basic auth, not as if you're using basic auth today, but there are legacy services still that are using basic auth, and you may need to communicate in that way with a back-end system from an internal Apigee system, as well as OAuth, JWT, and then you have a whole host of mediation policies that allow you to do message transformation, access a distributed data store for storing metadata about consumers or products or whatever you need to do. And then a whole bunch of ways to extend those policies with Java, Python, JavaScript, et cetera. So with that quick whirlwind tour, I'm going to add some security to my API, which is verifying the API key. I'm going to add spike arrest, which is designed to protect my backend. It says I can only handle 2,000 transactions per second in my backend. I'd like Apigee to fail for me so the client can hopefully fail gracefully, so I don't saturate the backend and ruin the experience for all of my consumers. And I'll add quota, which says, hey, I've got this consumer can have 50 calls a day because they're a trial user. This is a partner. They can make 1 million calls an hour. And I'm going to quickly grab a snippet of configuration for my quota, plug it in, and that's it. So I've secured the API, put in some rate limiting, and I'm managing client access limits with the quota. So I save this, and it gets deployed out to Apigee Cloud. And that's done. And I can trace this, which is a new part of the tool. It shows you the flow of everything through Apigee. Let's go ahead and call this service and call the rates endpoint. And as expected, it wants me to provide an API key because I just secured the service. So ignore these here. We're going to get to those in a minute. So now that I've secured the service, I've pre-registered an API key to save us a bit of time. I'll call it again. Now with an API key. And it goes through, and I can call it again, and I can see everything that's happening. These are the policies I just added. My API key security policy, my spike arrest, and my quota. In my quota, you can see I have 5 requests every 1 minute. That's how I configured it for this particular app. And you can see that I have 4 left at this point in time. So that's a very, very brief, quick tour of how it looks to develop proxies in Apigee. There are a lot of advanced features. The developer experience in here is really rich, and it's kind of unlimited what you can do in here. But I said I was going to tell you about 2 API developers. The other one is in Brian's lines of business. He wanted to enable citizen developers who they own the services. They don't want to necessarily have all of the people across all the lines of business fully engaged in understanding all of the nuances of Kaiser's regulatory concerns, their logging and auditing requirements, and all of these things. So he takes care of that. API Developer 1 takes care of that by building out flows that are reusable, and the experience for API Developer 2 looks something like this. Before I go over and show you that automated flow, I'm going to just quickly take a look at the state of my system right now, because some things are going to happen automatically, and we're going to see new artifacts appear. So I just created the exchange rates proxy. We did that together. The developer portal that we spoke about this is not Kaiser's portal. This is just an out-of-the-box portal that I put a logo in. If I go and look at the APIs that are available for me, there aren't any APIs. So along comes somebody from a line of business, and they would like to onboard their service. They have a specification, an open API spec. Some of you may have formerly known it as Swagger. This is basically a standard way of describing an API. It's documentation. So they have that spec that points to their API, and they know a few things about what they'd like to enable. So this that I'm showing you is a simple app that I built to represent the workflow management system that Kaiser has in place. It's not a part of a Kaiser tool. So they have a system that allows for this intake that we needed to integrate with. And our management APIs that we have in Apigee allow everything to be fully automated. So the flow looks something like this today. I, as a line of business, I'm in pharmacy. I want to onboard my API. This is currency V1. I will provide a YAML file, which describes that's my specification, my documentation for my API. And I can choose how to secure it. And then I can pick, these are those shared things that API Developer 1 has built in the platform and is available for me as features. I want quota, I want throttling. These are just representative. These things are, some of these are not optional in Kaisers. I just wanted to demonstrate that there's some flexibility in this type of approach. These I can't turn off, these are enforced. And I can choose how I want to log. Stackdriver, Splunk, syslog, I'll choose Stackdriver. I submit it, and I'm done. So what's happened in the background? So this application, for this was just one I built. At Kaiser, this was their existing tool. So what happened is that pushed into Git. So there's a stack in their CI pipeline. They're using Git, Jenkins, and Maven. So it pushed the artifacts, that spec, and the features that I wanted, the quota that I want Stackdriver logging, it pushes that into Git, and that triggers a job in Jenkins. So if I go to Jenkins, we probably have a job running already. It's in the queue. It's pending. Now it's running. So as this runs, I'll just describe a little bit about what's happening. So it's building my API proxy. It's running my JavaScript linting if I've included any resources. It's running proxy bundle linting to ensure I haven't done something that Kaiser doesn't allow. I may not be permitted to put my own logging policy that could push PII out to Splunk, right? So this is doing all of those things. It's uploading that metadata into the Apigee platform, the fact that I want to enable quota. It's now going to bundle up and deploy the proxy. It's doing that right now. As soon as this is done, you'll see my integration tests start kicking off. And it's testing my API live after deploy. And here they go. There's my integration test running, and it's done. So now that has just pushed, deployed, populated all the configuration necessary, run my API live, and testing has happened. Therefore, in my particular flow, I've then pushed it to my production branch that I won't wait around for. But you can see it's already kicked off. The production branch is going to do the same thing, testing it with a different set of data in a different environment. But at the end of that, it's going to publish my documentation to the portal and make the whole thing live and consumable. So let's go back and see what happened in Apigee. In Apigee, if I refresh this view, this is how I was when I left it. I had exchange rates. If I come back now, I've got my new proxy, created a few seconds ago. And if I open it, what I'm showing you here is one pattern of proxy development in Apigee, absolutely not the only pattern. But if you look in here, there's no policies. So the reason there are no policies is because we've chosen the approach of a metadata-driven runtime. So that metadata I chose, for instance, yes, I want to enable quota, yes, I want to enable spike arrest, that is runtime metadata that when API calls start coming in, there are policies at a higher level than a proxy that run on the runtime environment itself for every proxy. And it says, hey, if you've got the metadata that says enforce quota, I'll conditionally execute this policy. So when we run this, which I'll do right now, my test environment. I know I'm going to need an API key, so let me go ahead and get one. Send that request. All these policies executed, even though my proxy was bare. And that's just one approach and pattern for doing this kind of development. And essentially, at the beginning of the proxy flow, I have these hook points in the runtime environment where I can go and interrogate the request, and I know that it's associated with this particular proxy. And then I reach into my distributed data store and say, give me the feature configuration for this proxy. Do I need to enforce authentication that's an API key? Yes? Well then, fire this API key policy. You'll see this one is skipped because it said, do I need to enforce OAuth? No, I don't, not in this one. So that's the full complement of the policies executing based on nothing more than that UI with a couple click-throughs. And the whole thing's been deployed. I do want to leave a minute or two for questions, but I will quickly show you that it was also, I refreshed my portal. It's now published to my portal. And I've got documentation. And I can, as a consumer, I can run it live. So that's a completely automated pipeline that allowed the owner of the service to be in charge of configuring the features and the policies, even though they're not directly inserting policies, they're relying on policy sets that have been created by developer one. So,
did you want to do the announcement?
Yes. Quick announcement I do want to make. There have been a lot of announcements at Next, but this is one we are particularly excited about, is Apigee Hybrid. So Apigee Hybrid enables you to decouple the runtime environment from the rest of the platform so that you can, Brian mentioned that they consume Apigee as an on-premises deployment. They have the opportunity to then run just the runtime components in their infrastructure and have us host everything else, the analytics, the real-time monitoring, the bot detection, everything. So it can all be, they can push that all on. So,
yeah, no, I think for Kaiser and for us personally, I think this is a great potential opportunity for us. I mean, obviously, we did go with an on-prem solution, but any way that we can, and I believe we're in the beta program, unless you, yep. So, we are going to participate in this beta program because this is something that we want to leverage to potentially take some of the operational and the overhead away from us. We can still maintain and run the gateways, but we can move all of the other components that we don't want to necessarily manage, and we can offload that to GCP.
Great. All right, well, with that, we'll wrap it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.